Part 1. When the dog starts foaming out on the frontier. You didn't have time to wonder what was wrong with a dog. You just hoped it wasn't that one thing. The thing with the madness, the shaking, the foam, the eyes that didn't blink anymore. They didn't call it rabies. That word barely existed west of the Mississippi. Cowboys had another name for it: dog craze, foam sickness, or sometimes just the bite. If you said someone got bit and went wild, everybody knew what you meant. And if a dog came stumbling into camp, mouth open, tongue lolling, eyes rolling around like marbles in a jar, the rule was simple: shoot first, then burn the body, then pray it didn't already bite someone. Dogs were everywhere, and not all of them were friendly on cattle drives. Stray dogs followed wagons for scraps. Some were half-wild coyotes that had learned to act tame. Others were mangy ranch hounds turned feral after being left behind. Cowboys didn't keep pets the way folks do now. A dog might sleep beside you one night and bite your leg the next. No one vaccinated dogs. No one could. There was no treatment, no warning. Just one day, the dog stopped barking and started growling at nothing. Then it would try to bite anything that moved: a horse, a chicken, a fence post, or you. Some cowboys tied ropes around their bedrolls at night, not to stay warm, but to keep a mad dog from crawling in. They'd heard the stories. A man wakes up to something breathing on him, snarling low, foaming mouth inches from his face. By morning, the man is silent. By sunset, he's not the same. What they knew and what they didn't, he didn't know about viruses, didn't understand incubation periods or nerve pathways, but they knew what happened after a bite. It started small: a headache, a little twitching. The man would get mean, then quiet, then afraid of water. He couldn't swallow. His throat locked up. He'd shake all over and scream in his sleep. Sometimes he'd foam at the mouth too. And always, it ended the same way: death, ugly and loud. Or worse, death in silence. Tied to a cot so he didn't bite someone else. So when a dog came sniffing around acting strange, even a little strange, the camp would fall quiet. Men reached for rifles without speaking. No one wanted to be the one to hesitate. The code of the trail: no hesitation. There's an old cowboy code no one writes down. One of those unwritten rules. You learn fast or not at all. If the dog snarls with no reason, kill it. If it bites without warning, shoot it. If the man it bit starts sweating at night, tie him down. It was cruel, it was fast, but it was the only way they survived. Some stories say cowboys would shoot their own dogs if they saw one twitch too much. Better sorrow than madness. Better a clean death than a foaming one. Sometimes the dog had just eaten a bad rabbit. Sometimes it had cactus stuck in its jaw. But they didn't wait to find out. And then there were the coyotes. Coyotes were a different problem. They'd slip in at night, lean, silent, clever. If a coyote went rabid, it got bold. It might walk straight into a fire circle, eyes glowing, growling low, like it didn't see men at all, just meat. One rancher told the tale of a coyote that bit two horses, a dog, and a man before someone finally stopped it. They burned it right there, no ceremony, just flame and fear. They watched the man for days. On day 4, he started spitting. By day 5, he couldn't drink. By day 6, they tied him to a wagon wheel. He didn't make it to 7. Madness was the real killer. See, it wasn't just the infection that scared cowboys. It was the madness, the idea that a bite could turn a friend into something else, something dangerous, something no longer human. That fear stuck in your bones. If a man was bitten, everyone watched him like a rattlesnake. They didn't say it out loud, but everyone thought the same thing. Will he change? Will we have to do something? There were whispers of camps where men went missing at night, where no one talked about what happened, where a bit of foam on someone's shirt meant a shallow grave and a silent ride out the next morning. To be continued. Next, what happened when a cowboy got bit and started acting strange. Part 2. When a man started acting strange when a cowboy got bit. The hardest part wasn't the pain. It was the waiting. There was no clock on the infection. Sometimes it took a week, sometimes longer. The wound would close up neat, maybe just a scratch. He'd go back to writing, eating, joking around the fire like nothing ever happened. And then one night, he'd start sweating. That's when everyone else stopped sleeping. The symptoms no one spoke of. They didn't have medical books, but they'd seen it before. The man would get cold even under a blanket. His eyes would water. He'd start gulping like he couldn't breathe right. Then came the shaking. First the hands, then the legs, then the voice, stuttering, wild, whispering things no one understood. By day 2, he'd be mumbling about dogs in the dark, about things watching him. His mouth would dry out, but he'd spit constantly, like he hated the feel of his own tongue. No one had to say it out loud. They knew he was going. What they did and didn't want to do, there wasn't much you could do. No herbs, no cure, no remedy. Some tried whiskey, others prayed. A few tried to drain the bad blood, slicing the wound open again and bleeding it into the dirt, hoping the madness would spill out with it. It never worked. Some cowboys tied their sick friends down, ropes around wrists and ankles, wet cloth over the eyes, hands shaking as they watched a man they used to laugh with start to bark and gnash like a wild animal. Some didn't wait that long. There were stories, quiet ones, about men who rode out into the desert and never came back, about a last drink, a quiet goodbye, and the sound of a single shot echoing across the prairie. The horror of water, of the strangest things, was water. The sick ones were terrified of it. Just the sound of a canteen sloshing made them flinch. One ranch hand tried to drink and screamed when the cup touched his lips, like it was boiling hot. He thrashed so hard he knocked over the fire. Another was found clawing at a stream, whispering, get it out," over and over, even though no one knew what it was. They weren't just sick, they were haunted by something no one could see. And the worst part, everyone watching knew it might be them next. Cowboys didn't cry, but they remembered after it was over. However it ended, no one spoke of it. Cowboys weren't the kind to cry, not out loud, but they remembered. Quiet nights got quieter. Jokes died in throats. They'd stare into the fire, remembering the twitch in a friend's eye, the way his boots dragged on the dirt, the last thing he said before the madness swallowed him whole. Some even buried the sick ones with a Bible in one hand and a revolver in the other, just in case. Because out there, alone on the frontier, there were worse things than dying. The curse of the bit ones. Sometimes the madness didn't hit fast. Weeks could pass. A man would think he was fine, then start hearing things at night. He'd flinch at shadows. He'd jump when someone touched his shoulder. Other cowboys kept their distance. They said he was bit in the soul. These men didn't last long. They drifted from camp to camp, eyes wide, hands always near their belt. Some rode off without a word. Others, they stayed too long. No one wanted to be near them when the twitching started again. To be continued. Necks, fires, guns, and desert. Cures. How cowboys tried to stop the madness. Part 3. Fire, powder, and desperate cures out there. With no doctors for 100 miles, cowboys had to invent their own medicine. And when it came to rabid bites, they didn't whisper about recovery. They whispered about containment. If the sickness took hold, you weren't saving the man. You were trying to save everyone else. That's when the fire came out. The fire cures them. Cowboys believed the infection lived in the wound, that if you caught it early, you could burn it out. They'd heat a knife until it glowed orange, hold the man down, and press the blade right into the bite. The smell was unforgettable. Flesh, sweat, leather smoke. Men passed out from the pain. Some screamed for hours. Did it work? Sometimes. Maybe, or maybe those men were never infected in the first place. Either way, cowboys kept doing it because it gave them something to do. Something besides waiting for madness. Powder, ash, and smoke. Others had stranger cures. They'd mix black gunpowder with ash and pack it into the wound, then seal it with pine sap or grease. The idea was to draw out the sickness, to poison the poison. Some even rubbed tobacco juice into the bite, believing the bitter sting would choke the fever. One man tried mustard powder and coyote fat. Another poured hot whiskey straight into the puncture and set it on fire. It didn't matter how much it hurt. They feared the bite more than the cure. Smokehouses and isolation. Some ranches, if a man showed signs of sickness, they'd build a small smokehouse. Not for meat, but for him. A shack with a cot, a bucket, and a barred door. They'd sit outside, rifles across their knees, listening for the moment his voice changed. Sometimes he got better. More often, the door stayed shut until all sounds stopped. Then they'd burn the place to the ground, just in case. No gravestone, no cross, just ashes in the wind. The lone ride west. Some cowboys chose another way. They'd feel the fever start, feel the thirst and the shaking, and before anyone could say a word, they'd pack a canteen, a blanket, and a single bullet. They'd ride west, alone. No one followed. No one asked questions. Days later, someone might find a horse tied to a tree, a hat on a stone, nothing else. It was considered an act of mercy, for themselves and for the others, folk wisdom or desperation. They had no hospitals, no medicine, just grit and fear, so cowboys built their own logic. Burn it out, starve it with salt, drown it in smoke, keep the bitten cold, never sleep next to the sick. None of it made sense to a doctor, but to the men on the trail, it was medicine, primitive, painful, sometimes pointless, but it gave them hope, or at least something to blame when it failed. To be continued. Next, fear in the night, the stories that still haunt the prairie. Part 4. Fear in the night. Even long after the last bite, the fear stayed. Cowboys weren't superstitious by choice. The prairie didn't care about your beliefs, only your instincts. And when it came to rabid animals, those instincts ran deep. Too many sleepless nights, too many graves without names. Some things the West never forgot. The campfire whispers around the fire. When the night was too quiet and the coyotes didn't howl, men would talk low. About that one dog with the white eyes, about the man who laughed too hard before he snapped, about the cowboy who bit through his own tongue trying to stop the voices. They'd pass the bottle and tell the younger hands to listen. Close not just to the stories, but to the sounds in the dark. If you hear something panting behind you, one old rancher said, don't turn around, just run. They all laughed, but no one slept early that night. The ghost of the bittensome said the sickness never really left, even if a man survived. He was different. His eyes darted too much. He flinched at shadows. One drover refused to drink water for the rest of his life, said it looked wrong. There was a story about a scout named Harris, got bit, burned the wound, and lived. But he talked to himself after that, muttered about teeth and fire and the dog that waits. They found him years later, sitting under a tree in full sun, coat buttoned tight, whispering to something no one else could see. Dogs that didn't bark. The dogs changed too. They weren't pets, they were tools, camp guards, herders, hunters. But after the first case of sickness, cowboys looked at them different. A limping hound, dangerous. One that stopped barking, worse. One that growled without reason. Don't wait. Some men traveled without dogs after that, said it wasn't worth the risk. And if a pup was born from a mother that had acted strange, they drowned it, fast, quietly, with a look in their eyes like they were burying a secret. Why they remember it wasn't just the horror that stuck. It was the helplessness. Cowboys faced storms, stampedes, even bullets, and they could fight those, but rabies, it made a man watch his own mind slip away, made friends back up, made you fear your own reflection. It was a kind of death that came slowly, whispering, with foaming breath and twitching hands, and worst of all, it didn't always look like death at first. Sometimes it looked like a scratch, a stray dog, a night shiver. That's what haunted them. The legacy of fear. Even today, the old ghost towns carry it. Rusting dog collars in the dust, scorch marks where a cabin burned down with no clear reason, a buried flask with teeth marks on the rim. Historians talk about frontier medicine, but cowboys didn't call it that. They called it doing what you had to. And if you ever sleep out there, far from the lights, near the bones of a forgotten cattle trail, and you hear scratching, don't check your boots, don't call out. Just hope the fire stays lit.